Hey guys, how's it going? Daniel P. Riley here, author and owner of Whimsyland.org literary coaching and services. Today I'm reviewing Record of the Paladin, The Book of Oliver by Brian McCoppin. And as always, there's an interview with the Florida man himself after. If you'd like to see more content like this, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Now, Record of the Paladin's Book of Oliver isn't available yet, so you can sign up at thepaladinbooks.com to keep an eye out for this upcoming title. I received an advanced copy because I'm awesome, do these review videos, and run the Discord group for authors called Laureate. If you'd like to know more about Laureate or have a novel you want to write, follow me on Twitter at Mr. DP Riley or contact me through whimsyland.org. But enough about me, let's get into it. Book of Oliver is not Weird West as it might appear. It's an urban Christian fantasy, and that's a distinction that needs to be said right away. The story centers around a gunslinging crusader named Oliver Donnelly, an orphan boy chosen and raised by a gruff, hard-drinking man named Garin Donnelly. What sets them apart from others is that Garin trained Oliver to combat evil, not men per se, though there's some of that. No, these two fight demons. In this book, demons take more than a few forms, and I'm not going to spoil it for those of you who are going to read the book on how they appear. Just know that it's rather satisfying to enjoy the vision of actual monsters being ventilated and destroyed in the name of righteous faith. And that's the thing that makes Book of Oliver stand out to me. It's a Christian action fiction. There's monster slaying, there's guns, there's faith and camaraderie. A father and son, an organization of demon hunters that doesn't just vanquish, some research, and others build new means of combating the infernal. And there's some silliness too, sometimes in the chapter titles like Jesus and Waffles, and some colorful characters among the ranks of the Paladins. Now, the lore of the Paladins is that this organization has existed in some form throughout the centuries. Always in sets of 3 circles or departments depending on the era, each department focused on its own specialty aspect of demon hunting and leans towards the number 12 as its cap on roster. This special significance of details adds even more mystery to the story, giving the reader something to think about after putting the book down. The faith in Book of Oliver is prominent, yet it's not preachy really. Not until a truly critical part of the tale anyways. That one chapter may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's integral, and I hope more than a few readers respond to it in the same way that I did, with reverence and an open mind. Otherwise, the religion is in the background, and a driving force in the narrative that's more about the characters and the war against evil. For all that I enjoyed about Book of Oliver, Brian is a first-time fiction author, and it shows. He's written a few non-fiction projects, in particular Hell Desk to Help Desk, which is available on Amazon and took a slightly fictional bend in the altering of stories to make a point without calling anyone out. Because of that, this version of Book of Oliver that I got to read felt unpolished. Brian relies on a flashback system to fill in background a lot, and while it provides the reader with a deep dive into Oliver's life and his special upbringing through Garin, it's more jarring to the book's plot than it would be in a movie or TV show. Hopping between storylines slows down the pace of both stories, and weaving 2 separate storylines together like that, even though they're both feeding the narrative and background, is hard for even the best of authors. Certain tropes that add quirky detail to some characters at the start become a frustration in later aspects of the book, but these don't really take away from the overall narrative like the flashbacks and head hopping do. In case you're not familiar with the term head hopping, it's when the point of view flits from one person to the next, instead of remaining fixed on the main character. It allows an author to paint outside the canvas by adding in thoughts from other characters, but too much of it can really frustrate readers. I'm guilty of this just as much as the next guy, so it doesn't matter if you've written your first novel or your 5th like me. It happens. Nevertheless, Book of Oliver is a fun, faith-based action book that takes itself just seriously enough to be impactful, while not seriously enough to lose that exciting adventure feel that action fiction thrives in. For what it's worth, I'm giving this initial copy of Book of Oliver 3 stars. But I wouldn't be surprised to see its final form reach 4 or even 5 stars. It's a great premise, a spectacular storyline, and with a little more shine, a titan of Christian fiction when it comes out. On top of that, he's already working on the next book, and the first couple of chapters are made into a comic book or a graphic novel, if you will, by another colleague and friend of both of ours. Doing multimedia projects like that takes a lot of guts, but I think it works really well for what Brian has achieved with Book of Oliver. And I hope in time that this Christian action story becomes a full graphic novel series. I think that particular medium benefits a lot more from the flashback concept that I spoke of, and would make for a really great narrative in a comic book or a graphic novel format. Now, without further ado, the Florida man from his back deck, Brian McCoppin. All right, guys, I'd like to welcome Brian McCoppin live from Florida, where it's beautiful, as you can see. How you doing, Brian?
Good, Daniel. Thank you for having me in and talking about my books today.
I'm glad to have you. It's always fun to do these interviews. So, first things first, you've written most recently the Hell Desk to Help Desk, and your fiction book, which is what we're going to talk about, Paladins, Book of Oliver.
Yes, so Record of the Paladins, tentatively scheduled for release in October right now. It's going through editing now, so as soon as the editor's done, I can get the pre-release work done, get it all lined up. If you're interested in learning more about it, it's thepaladinbooks.com. I do have a book out, like you mentioned, the Hell Desk to Help Desk, Salvation for IT Support. It's a non-fiction IT book, so kind of boring to most people, but it's available at helldeskbooks.com if you want to find out how to make your IT experience of your corporation better.
I actually probably gonna have you on and once more after I read that one, because I'm curious about it. And we talked a little bit on Laureate, and you have some stories that are pretty interesting in that book.
Yeah, the stories of the book for Hell Desk are based on true life stories. I fictionalize them, I change the names and whatnot, so no one gets mad when they read the book later in life. But if you ever worked in IT, people get angry and violent, and that's why I call it Hell Desk, because I've worked with IT people who've just been crushed by their corporation. They just come in yelling at them, screaming at them, threatening them, and with legal action. And there's a better way. There's definitely a better IT out there for people. So the book's fun because it's basically a series of stories around a fictional company, and I break down the various hells of IT.
That sounds really cool. So let's talk about Record of the Paladins, Book of Oliver here. Okay, so we're back after a bit of a technical glitch there, and we're going to go back to the beginning with that first question of why'd you want to get into fiction? Let's just start over again.
And a second chance, I can phrase it better. That's great. So all my life, I've been writing short stories, and I would start a book, 2 or 3 chapters, and I never really got around to finishing. I wasn't passionate about it. I've always been a reader. My mom introduced me to the Dune novels when I was in 6th grade, and I really got into science fiction. I kind of lean more what I call violent fiction, where it's action-based, action fiction, violent fiction, whatever you want to call it. So like the Dune novels, I really enjoyed the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. When I read the Stephen King novels, I read The Gunslinger, the first one, at least a dozen times. I enjoyed that one so much. I finished all 7 of that series. The last 4 books I didn't like as much. I don't know if Stephen King got off message or what happened. So it hit me. I can make a story that follows through a message, and we can also have characters that are positive role models. When you look at a lot of violent fiction, you get these anti-heroes, these jaded individuals who have emotional or physical trauma that becomes like their mark of pride. So their violence is their therapeutic for them. I said, well, can we have heroes who are not only positive role models, but strong faith-based relationships with Jesus Christ Christians who only use the violence for biblical or glorifying ways. And so I sat down. I had this short story I written. It became the first chapter of Record of the Paladins. And I said, I'm going to take these characters. I'm going to look back at history. I'm going to find a way to connect some pieces and some dots and create characters that reflect the Old Testament wonderment I had, where you read about Samson and how strong he was, and Solomon, how smart he was, and how they did these heroes in the Old Testament do these supernatural things. You have like Meshach, Ashach, and Abednego surviving in the fire. You have Joseph in the lion's den, taming the lions. These supernatural abilities, would they really just fade away, or have they been moved to other people? And how would that work? How would they move to other people? What would be the formula to make that happen? So I had the first chapter done 15 years ago. I wrote the short story. And then I said, okay, over the last 15 years, I added 2 more chapters. So I only had 3 chapters of this novel done. Last year, I got to a point in my career where I had a tremendous amount of free time. I'm sitting around a lot, and I'm not, just kind of waiting for things to happen. A lot of passive income rolling things in. And I said, I'm stuck home. People are locked down. I can't do a whole lot of traveling. Let me just crank out this novel. So August of last year, I only had about 6,000 words in the book. Between August and I would say April, I got the book finished. I got the last 90,000 words cranked out. During that same time period, I also cranked out the Help Desk book. It was another 40,000 word book. So I was able to get a lot of typing done over the last year. Done many revisions, many edits. So the long and short of why I got into writing is I wanted to create heroes that guys like me who like the violent fiction but are also faith-based Christians can have a hero to look up to and to read about.
That's awesome. And actually a little similar to why I started writing too, is I tried to come up with something similar in that I wrote G Sedai as an anime in a novel, or like a manga in a novel form. And through the course of writing it, the character Gabriel was sort of meant to be a semi metaphor, and I couldn't figure out how to tie it together until I had this inspiration for the character of Hasegawa, who is the caretaker for a church outside of the mega city and the ruins of what's left of the world outside of the mega city. And it all came together right there perfectly for me. So I was just thinking that when you were talking about looking for heroes that are faith-based and that you can identify with in the kind of the more action, I guess, and probably a little more violent than much of what Christian fiction does these days.
Yeah, because Christian fiction has the problem as a Christian, we're supposed to be known by our love, but we're supposed to hate the violence of the world. Modern world violence is not personified. It's not like walking around on the streets. So it's hard to have a violent action against the violence. Maybe you're mad at porn, so you throw your computer in the garbage. Something like that is your violent action. But where's the outlet for when you read the Old Testament and you have like David smiting the armies, and you have these incredible things they did. Like, man, I want more of that. I want some of this action based. Like, I know Jesus has dominance over demons, but can we still kick the demon's butt once in a while? Can we go out there and slap them around? And enjoy the fact that we have dominance and dominion over the hordes of Satan, and that they have no power against us, and enjoy that a little bit.
Absolutely. That's very cool. So in that, I know there's a foreword in the book, and I don't want to spoil it for potential readers, but I do have to ask because it's a really important question for all of us as authors. You talk a little bit about the inspiration for the main characters.
So I took pieces of Roland Deshin from The Gunslinger, which was the short story kind of based around a little bit. I made him younger, and I said, if I was to be this character, so much of myself in this character. So in the forward, I tease a little bit about where he kind of came from. So to say I met him in real life is not a total falsehood. He's a combination of people I have met through my life, and the way he talks, the way he responds. I have this guy Ian Wilson turning the first 2 chapters into a comic book, and he said, "What does Oliver look like?" I said, "Well, he looks like Chris Pratt from The Magnificent Seven. If you were to watch the remake with Chris Pratt in it, looks like that guy." And the joke is, I don't know how familiar you are with Chris Pratt. He was in the show called Parks and Rec. Mm-hmm. He was kind of a chubby, goofy dude. And while he was in Parks and Rec, my wife sees, hey, he looks kind of like you. But now that he's buff and ripped all the time, my wife's like, why don't you look like him anymore? So there's definitely something to that. That my wife's, again, this is many, many years ago when I was younger and closer to age to when he was that show. But there's definitely some, and any author who says I'm not in any of my characters, they're lying to you. Every author puts a little bit of themselves in at least one character of their book.
Definitely, it's very true. On the same subject of inspiration for the MCs, I want to pick your brain a little bit about the world building for Book of Oliver, because it starts in a very Western manner, and there's definitely a feel to that, but it slowly, at least for the first couple of chapters, it's a little slow, and then it ramps up really fast. But it goes from almost a Western style to an urban supernatural, urban paranormal style. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a bit about where you got that inspiration, how you came up with the world build for Book of Oliver.
Yeah, so I wanted much of the novel to take place in modern day. In my mind, it's set in 2013. That's right. As an author, you'll framework your timeline off. I won't come out and say it, but in my mind, it's the year 2013 on the current time frame when Oliver's an adult during that time frame.
Right.
I wanted to paint pictures of people that haven't never left America, that there are parts of the world that are still stuck in like the 1800s, 1700s. There's some very rundown parts of this world that if you ever get to travel, it doesn't feel like the 21st century. So like even in America, there's parts where the gold rush happened and these cities showed up. They lasted 10, 15 years. The building stayed, but the people left. There are still some cities in the Western America. There's a dozen, maybe 20 people trying to help the city survive because that's all they've known. Their family's been there for 4 or 5 generations. And if you go visit these cities, like in, California or Arizona, you'll see these really rundown old cities. You feel like you're in the Wild West all of a sudden. So part of it was you come in, man, this is Western. And all of a sudden, no, they're traveling in Europe. They're traveling all over Asia. Like, well, it's all over America. What happened? So I try to shock people a little bit with, there's some really rundown parts of the world. One part of the book that takes place in a factory that's been abandoned since 1940. And there's parts of the world where once World War II ended, it stopped. That was the end of the development for that world. And that's all they've ever had ever since. And that's the max of their technology, the max of their infrastructure. Just 1945, boop, all right, nothing else has been built since then. So there's some very eerie, fun places to go explore this world. I want to take people to some of those.
Yeah, and I think you definitely did in the way you described certain parts of the book as they were experienced. And I think that's kind of cool. I spent a year in Texas in a little town called Manor, just outside of Austin. And not far from there was a literal ghost town from the West. There was just buildings. It was an attraction. You didn't pay for it. You just showed up and wandered around. It was just empty. And we spent about an hour there, my daughter and I, and before she got bored, because she's young. But I thought it was just it blew my mind that something like that still existed and was just sitting there out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and I'm working on the second book now, and there's parts of the world that have never seen electricity. So my goal is to take you guys to these parts where, like, what would it be like to be a modern person who's familiar with cell phones and computers and whatnot? And there's nothing. There's no electricity. There's no running water, and you have to survive and do things in that area. You mentioned where you grew up near. I grew up on the east coast of Florida, this small little town called Flagler Beach. The town, as of this day, is still stuck in 1950. You go there, one stoplight, there's like 4 or 5 diners, little tiny restaurants. Everybody there, the median age is like 75 now, probably. It's just a little tiny, quiet retirement town that my parents decided to retire at. And it's fun. It's people watch Back to the Future and they laugh when they see Marty McFly go to the 50s. Like, hey, that's Flagler Beach about the ocean. That's all that town is. I grew up in that.
That's really cool. It's interesting what we can come up with as authors, taking from what knowledge we may have or some new experience that we've put ourselves through. I did a tour of local Civil War sites last summer, and I've been drawing on that knowledge for some of my recent books that I've been working on because they were so inspiring and interesting. I hope I do them justice.
Are you like me, where when you're at historic sites, you walk around, you have to read every plaque?
Mm,
That's nuts. I got to read every plaque, and she's like, "Oh, you'll recap it later at the hotel." Like, all right, so
my daughter and I did a ghost tour at Gettysburg, so we had to follow along with this guy who was dressed in period stuff and telling us all about everything. But we were walking around the outskirts of the Gettysburg battlefield, and every single freaking statue I had to run up to and look at. And my daughter's like, "Come on, they're leaving," and I gotta look at it. I have to absorb as much information as I possibly can. It's just the way I am. So, my general question for everybody that I have on the show: how long in total? Because I know you said that you really kind of knuckled down and finished the book um, during that sort of half quarantine time we all were stuck in. But how long in total do you think it took for you to fully come up with and then put on paper the whole of Record of Paladins, Book of Oliver?
if I count the first chapter I wrote, it'll be 15 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, over the last 14 years was 3 chapters. Then over the last year was 17 chapters. So, my goal for the next book, less than a year, have it out and start that cycle. My plan is originally going to be 12 books, but the feedback I'm getting from my writers and my friends who've read the book, Benjamin needs a book. So it's going to be 13 books now. Benjamin Blau, the Montessori Jew who's a pirate, he needs a book, apparently. So we're going to need 13 books.
Sometimes that happens. That's so it's been rattling around in your head for 15 years, basically.
Yeah. And, those 3 chapters, I would get, let me go write down a couple ideas. I had this huge file of outlines. Like I had developed the names. It's based on the old French legends. I don't want to reveal too much because the book kind of covers where the French legend comes from. So I had the names figured out. Then I said, well, how am I going to make these 12 characters unique? I can't just have 12 gunslingers or 12 knights or 12 fighters. That's not an efficient force for good. So we got to have fighters, we got to have researchers, we got to have communicators, we got to have inventors. How am I going to break it apart? And then I said, over the time, like, well, there's 12. 12 is a very important number in the Bible. There's 12 tribes of Israel. There's the 12 disciples. There's 12 months in the year. There's all these things that the number 12 reflect. And I said, well, there's also 3. 3 is super duper important in the Bible. You got the Holy Trinity. And how am I going to work that into the formation of my paladin? So, my minor in college was mathematics. So a lot of my breakdowns are, how can I make a number sequence out of this to kind of make it make sense?
And you did that with the departments.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't want to reveal too much, but I'm looking forward to, as I get more of the characters discovered over the next couple of books, what they bring to the story. Not everybody's gonna be a fighter. You guys meet one character, and her entire job is basically inventing things for the Paladin. That's kind of her job.
Kind of the cue of the group.
Right, exactly. And we need that. And people are in real life are passionate about that. Not everybody wants to stand up and take martial arts and be a fighter. Some people want to, be an inventor or be an educator or be a communicator, or they want to work on computers, or they want to be a reader and just research all the time. So there's definitely a need and a place for these kind of people.
And what's really cool about that is there's sort of a cognitive dissonance when it comes to concepts of science and technology and then faith. Like you one or the other. Like there's a lot of people who sort of pigeonhole Christians specifically into this concept of science deniers and things like that. So having characters that are scientists and inventors and engineers and things that are doing so for the holiest of good is a really cool aspect of what you've designed.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's true. Like people give like improper impressions. Oh, if you're a Christian, you don't believe in science. No. Science and Christian kind of go hand in hand. Like the 7-day mythology lines up with evolution. It's just 7 days versus 16 trillion years. You got to look at, are they exaggerating? Or are they just telling a story? Like the way I tell it, if I go back in time to the year 84 BC and I say the word trillion, they didn't have a concept of numbers that big. So they're trying to tell these stories and understand. If I try to explain to an ant what my shoelace does, the ant would have his mind blown. It's just a simple thing like a shoelace. This is a God trying to tell us how he made the universe. He's trying to dumb it down for us, I believe.
That's a big tenet of science fiction in general, is that I think I may be badly paraphrasing here, but I think the phrase is science, or is it science, or magic is just science we haven't explained yet.
Yes.
So the concept being that if someone from the future or from another more evolved society came to people in a past time period, they would be viewed as some sort of god or sorcerer or something for the cell phone in their hand. So that's really cool. That was one of the things that jumped out at me, was it's not just about crusaders for faith. It's not just about one of the things that I started with, when I first got on Twitter, was meeting with Adam Lane Smith, just talking with him, and I kind of started following him and reading some of his how-to novels, like guides. And he wrote a series of lit RPG books that were about crusaders and power armor slaughtering demons, and it was real gung-ho stuff. It was like very cool, but it was very direct, and so you didn't get to see this aspect of there are so many moving parts to an organization, that even a faith-based organization, that don't just have to do with raw smite evil with big sword.
Yeah, even like a simple church. There's a dude up there running the projector and controlling the lights. There's it's a whole team that gets involved in every little production.
Absolutely. So my favorite question, which is the best question ever, what was your favorite part of writing Book of Oliver?
So I really enjoyed the way Garen and Oliver's relationship developed. My inspiration for Garen. Have you seen Django Unchained, the movie?
Oh yes.
I can't remember the actor's name, but the Austrian guy who trains Django how to be a gunfighter.
His name is weird, and I can never remember it.
Let me make an Irish version of him, make him Christian, and make him a little bit of a drunk, and have fun training people how to be a gunfighter. And so I took this character, I morphed him a little bit, and I can visualize Garen so clearly in my head. I visualize, out of all the characters, I see him the most clearest, and I think he is my current voice. Where Oliver was my voice when I was 20 or 30. As I approach my 50s, I think I'm becoming more and more Garen. I know I can't do the things I once was able to in my youth. I have all these skills I'm trying to pass on to my children and all this knowledge. And at the same time, I enjoy a nice, quiet evening by the water, drinking whiskey and smoking. And Garen does that a lot. So
Yeah, he does.
this is like, Garen is I guess my ultimate goal in life, where I'm able to just kind of cruise out, have had a full, complete life, and I'm handing off my adventure to somebody else. So writing him and his relationship with Oliver was the most fun. You probably see the most care and detail out of those chapters. They might be considered the more boring chapters because very little action happens in these Oliver Garen chapters. All the action takes place when Oliver is an adult chapter. But I always find it essential to have, why is Oliver on this journey and how did he get to this place? Many times you get to like Jack Reacher. They talk a little about Jack Reacher's background. He's in the army. He's super strong. He's super smart. All these things. I appreciate that about the books. But sometimes you get a hero, and he's just the hero right away, and you have no idea how he got there. Are you familiar with the manga, The One Punch Man?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a character who has every power and no backstory, and it's a comedy on purpose. So I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to develop a character slowly, take my time with it, and when you get to the end of the book, like, oh, that's how Oliver got there. That's why he's doing these things, and that's kind of the story, and that's why he's driven to do what he does. And it really comes back to Garen and the way Garen raised him.
Right. When it comes to Oliver and Garen, for me, I'm sure you're familiar with the reboot of Hawaii Five-0.
I'm not. Okay.
Oh, wow.
No, I have.
So the new version of that show, Steve McGarrett is this Navy SEAL, very gung-ho dude. He's running a task force on the islands, and through the first season or two, he's just action man, and he's great. It's a lot of fun. But then they introduced this character named Joe White, and Joe White is this older Navy SEAL who's sort of taken the tutor role, the teacher role for the government. But it turns out that Joe trained Steve McGarrett, so you get to see this older guy that is basically the old wise version of what you've been watching for 2 seasons in Steve. And I get that sense with Oliver and Garen, that you have Oliver who is taking this legacy that Garen has instilled in him over all the time in training, and he's like a younger and possibly more effective version of Garen because of that.
I'm glad you caught that, because when you compare their abilities, Oliver's is much more useful. Garen's is great, and I would love to have Garen's ability, but in the practicality of life, what Oliver has is an amazing ability. I'm not going to spoil for readers what the ability is, but it's just, you can use that anywhere. Like driving down the street, it'd be amazing driving down the street, I think, or Tracy's people, or just even walking down the hallway sometimes. Like it's just incredible. It's the inspiration from that kind of hint a little bit. Have you seen what's that? The time traveler movie with the rabbit, the guy. Oh boy, Jake Gyllenhaal is the main actor, and an airplane falls down through the house. And
Donnie Darko.
Remember how Donnie Darko, how they can see fate?
Yeah,
coming out of people.
Those
that was
lines that were
for the abilities. How to describe the abilities for Oliver. That's
cool. I didn't even think about that when I was reading it. It didn't even dawn on me. That's awesome, though. So the follow-up question I have to ask now, as we're moving on a little bit, is what did you like least about writing it?
On the process itself, it's difficult for me to go back and self-correct a lot of my grammatical errors. It's a hard process for me. So because it's so difficult, I often don't enjoy it. So even to this day, I'm still finding grammatical errors. As I'm doing my revision, I'm still finding little things. I'm terrible at spelling the word gray. I use the British version, EY.
So do I.
Spell check gets mad at me every time about that. And the writing itself, I think the only chapter that was the least enjoyable chapter was when Oliver and Garen go to and walk the path of Jesus. That was the hardest to write, because it felt like I felt like people read this are going to be bored. But I think it's such a crucial part of this. I want to have this in the book. It needs to be in the book, but I'm worried the reader's going to be bored. So I was like, I'm thinking to myself, please, reader, just get through this chapter. I promise it's worth it. I promise you'll enjoy it. I apologize that, I try to add descriptive details of the Dead Sea and of the soccer game they play and the fun stuff they do. But I know they're here to have demons killed, not to get a tour of the Holy Land. So it was but I needed that chapter as a bridge piece. I needed it to happen. So I think going back, I may have found a better way of conveying that chapter or conveying that time between Oliver and Garen, but it was essential, but it was difficult to write.
Understandable. And the great thing is that you can always go back and tweak it a little bit if you need to.
Yeah.
But I can totally understand that, especially for someone who may be, excuse me, curious but not really faith oriented. That
right.
particular part, I found it intriguing and depth orienting, and it was definitely important to the story. I agree with you. But someone who is not faith oriented, that may just be curious and really interested in the story, probably would lose a bit of their immersion at that point. That I can't see any other way for you to convey that part without doing what you did.
So readers, when you're reading the Where Jesus Walked chapter, feel free to skim and just get unless you're very, very curious to the root of Christian faith and where it comes from and what it means. This is a chapter you can skim over. But if you're curious about it, for Christian faith and what we believe and why we believe it, it's a great chapter to read. I highly encourage it.
It sure is. Totally is. So I know that you just said you're looking at doing 12 total Record of the Paladins, possibly 13 now with the addition. You have any plans for any other fiction books other than Record of the Paladins?
Yeah, I have a short story I wrote that I want to finish. The long and short of it is, if I were to say to you that the vastity of the universe is primarily set in chaos, and I have a minor in math, so I'll tell you all things need balance. If the vastity is chaos, then the singularity would be order. So what if this singularity can be placed inside a person? What would that look like? So to the outsider, it'll look like this person has tremendous luck. Everything goes right for this person. So the backstory is there's two groups of individuals. One that's wants to use the singularity for good, one that wants to use it obviously for evil, competing over the current holder of the singularity. And the backstory I have for this is the way it works is when the person dies, which is very, very difficult to do. If you have all the luck of the universe, it's hard to kill you. It's very, very hard to kill you. But when this person dies, the singularity goes to somebody random. And so the bad organization is always killing the singularity in hopes it goes to one of their members. They're actively out just killing, and they're wrong sometimes. People are sometimes just lucky. So they're killing the wrong people sometimes. And the positive group, because they're positive, they have less funding. There's really no backers because there's no benefit other than for being good. There's really no benefit to having singularity. So there's a smaller group that are trying to find the singularity and protect them and help them understand how to use their special ability. So I think the only reason I paused it was I saw they had this character Domino on the Deadpool movie. Like, Domino is like a light version of my character,
Yeah, very similar. Her ability to control probabilities.
Right. I think maybe if I can get more in depth on explaining why the opposite of chaos everywhere is order and singularity, I can make the tale a little more interesting, a little more in depth on why this happens and why it works this way.
It sounds really fun, though.
I doubt it'd be a multiple series novel. I kind of visualize it more as when I first wrote the rough draft, it was a goofy college kid who passed a test on accident. That's how he discovered he's getting lucky. He passed this test. Like, I should have. He wins a lottery ticket. Like, man, I've never won anything. Like, these weird things are happening to him. And this dude shows up. Well, fortunately, it's one of the good guys and starts helping him. But he's the ultimate frat boy bro dude. He wants to use it to get girls, to score money, to take advantage of it. And this guy is saying, no, calm down. You got the greatest power known in the universe. You can't be out picking up chicks with it. So
That's cool. I'm looking forward to that one. That sounds like a lot of fun. Um, so what advice would you give to a new author, someone who's just working on their first book, as somebody who's written a few nonfiction things and now gotten into fiction as well? What sort of advice do you think you would give a new author that might be watching the show?
Finish your book. Finish it. Whatever it takes.
So that everybody says.
Daniel, Whimsy Land Service can help you get through your book for sure.
Thanks.
There's plenty of services and people out there, but Daniel's one of the best. Get your book done. Don't worry about if it's good yet. Don't worry about if it's well spelled out. Just get the story done. Then go back, clean it up. Get the arc finished. Get to the end, and then go back. Have a dozen people. Daniel hosts his Laureate group. They all do reading for each other. So another group you can join to get some beta readers. Get your friends and family to read the book. Don't be in a hurry to publish it. Take your time and get it complete. But once you publish your first book, if you plan on making a career out of it, get your second one out in a hurry. Don't get off the radar. You got to stay on the radar. You can't wait 12 years between books. Once the first one's out, the gate's open. You've gone through the process. Get your second one done before the year ends, and force yourself to do it. Find a way to find the time and just get it done.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's what I always say. Consistency is key. That's the big motto for Whimsy Land, as you said. Get it done. Even if you only spend 1 hour a day on it, you get the busiest schedule. It's all good. Sit down, spend 1 hour, get some words on the page. You will get it done, get it out there. And like for me, my goal is 3 books a year now. And I've got 2 finished, working on the 3rd one. So we're getting there.
Yeah, it's like the Joel Lopez, the wife of sexual. He has this recurring post that says, you can't find 45 minutes in a day, but you'll find out who your favorite Harry Potter color is.
Yeah.
If you got that kind of time, go write a book.
Absolutely. And it really depends on what you're writing too. It doesn't have to be, like I've said before, it doesn't have to be a 300-page tome. It doesn't have to be 500 or 600 pages. Like the last one, interview I did with Anthony Harris, his book, 692 pages. Doesn't have to be like that.
Like Battlefield Earth. That's a crazy tome.
It is. It was quite the book. It took a while to get through it, and I enjoyed reading it, but it was long.
But some people really enjoy that, like getting lost and having one story they can follow for like months as they read through it. Some people really like that.
Yep. But like I wrote G Sedai, and that one's less than 200 pages, and it barely qualifies as a novel. I'll be honest. It just squeaks into that category. Right. But I wrote it that way intentionally because it's supposed to be more of a small serialized thing that I can eventually build a new compendium. And a couple of my readers have said they think it would make for a great graphic novel or an actual manga or something. So that I'm looking into doing that in the future. But the most important thing is get it done and then don't stop. A lot of people do. Like there was that guy that everybody was freaking out about on Twitter who was supposed like they gave him $1 million and he was going to read the first chapter of his book that they've all been waiting for, and he never bothered writing it. Don't be that guy, people. So next question is a little more esoteric, but it's one that I always like to think about, is if you could go back 15 years when you first thought up Record of the Paladins, Book of Oliver, that short story, what would you say to yourself back then to maybe motivate yourself to work on it sooner rather than later?
It'd probably be the same advice. Finish the book. If I would have finished that book 15 years ago, I'd probably have all 12 done by now.
Yeah, exactly.
I could, and life gets in the way. I didn't have any kids 15 years ago. The birth of my first daughter, I think, interrupted part of that process. At the same time, caring for her and working, and but I look back and there's definitely a lot of wasted time. Right? And I'm not going to say I regret anything, but there's definitely, why did I spend time doing that? Why did I spend time doing that when I could have been producing something? So I don't regret it at all. I'm very happy to see a fantastic life now, but it'd be nice to have the 12 novels completed and just have that, sitting on my shelf. I can look at them and talk about them. Maybe convince some group to throw me some money to make a movie out of them, or a television series. Or
That would be great. Yeah, one of the things that I tend to talk to my clients about when we first get together is that I'm 43. I've got 5 fiction novels under my belt. I've got 2 produced nonfictions and a bunch of books that I ghost wrote but can't claim in any capacity. But I didn't start doing this until a couple of years ago. And I could have been doing it. I wanted to do it, but I kept giving myself excuses not to, and would find other ways to do the thing that I wanted to do without actually publishing anything. Like, I was spending all of my time when I wasn't working and doing stuff with my family on role-playing sites. And basically I was writing novels for free for the entertainment of my friends. And then it finally clicked, and I'm like, why am I doing this? I should have been writing all of these things down and turning them into novels 20 years ago. So when I think about the question, it's exactly what you were saying. Just do it now.
Yeah.
Don't waste time. And any young author or aspiring author that watches this, we agree, both of us, do it now. Don't put it off.
it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't. You get it done.
It absolutely. Well, it has been an awesome and very enjoyable experience for me sitting down with you. I love doing these interviews with everybody, and I'm looking forward to doing many more over the years as this thing continues to grow. It is time to say goodbye. Brian McCoppin, Record of the Paladins, Book of Oliver, and Help Desk to Help Desk, which, even if you're not an IT person, might be fun for you to read anyways, because I hear all these good things about it, and how interesting the story is and how you wrote it.
I will say, don't let your kids read it.
Yeah.
Remember, it's IT, and IT involves porn, so there's going to be some fun stuff in the later chapters. So
What do you say, rated PG-13? Maybe
PG-13 is a safe rating. Yeah, there are a few F-bombs that get dropped, but not enough for an R rating, probably. So
that's cool. All right, man. Thank you very much for being on the show.
this is great. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to doing another hour with you after I get through Help Desk to Help Desk.
All right. Yeah, let me know. I'll be there for you.
Great. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Daniel.